with any organization that's that consistent.
Yeah.
Ready?
She's like, anytime you come up with an address, if any people are having trouble getting it figured out, because a lot of times it'll say, yeah, it's not available in your area. I called customer service to get it set up, and they're like, yeah, no, sorry, it's not available.
All right, here we go. Welcome to the Peterborough Select Board meeting for March 15th, 2022. I'm Tyler Ward. Along with the table here with me are fellow Select Board members Bill Taylor and Bill Kennedy. We have Town Administrator Nicole McStay here to answer all of our questions. Tonight, we'll have our public hearings about to start to consider amendments to Section 146 Financial Policies, Section 165 Purchasing, Section 194 Treasurer Duties and Responsibilities, Section 195 Vehicles and Traffic, and Section 166 Recreation Facilities Rules and Regulations, the Code of the Town of Peterborough. Next up, we'll discuss elderly exemptions regarding taxes we touched on at prior meetings. And for new business, we will hear about some concerning legislation up at the state level. Numbers SB 249, which refers to short-term rentals, and then the possibility that we may lose our meals and rooms tax in our towns to hurt us even more in our tax burden. So, and then at 6 o'clock, please come back. We do have our follow-up Select Board / Budget Committee meeting. We'll with a warrant review and votes to recommend or not, and then we'll review and vote to approve Joint Select Board Budget Committee minutes. Allie's not here to take minutes this evening, so anybody that speaks up, please speak up loudly so you can be caught on camera or recording. Tim Brezovik's behind the scenes capturing all this for later transcription and to view and to archive and all that fun stuff. With that, a lot of amendments.
Yes.
A lot of reading.
Yes. So these
A lot
were,
of work.
yeah, just to, so they kind of fall into, a couple of different categories. The financial policies, purchasing, treasurer duties and responsibilities, those are all policies that are very out of date. The one critique that the auditor had is that they're so very out of date. They, in some cases, don't reflect how we currently operate. There's nothing wrong with the way we operate now. There was nothing wrong with the way we operated then. It's just, we need to change the name of the bank. We need to, further clarify, who does what. We need to change some of the job titles. In other cases, it was critical. We didn't have any references to how we manage federal projects, federally funded projects. So it was very important to get those in there. And then there was some just updating, for instance, particularly the purchasing policy. It had last been touched in 2006. It was really time for those numbers to be looked at and for those thresholds to be looked at, how we manage our purchases. With the way that it had been, that's currently written, we wouldn't even be able to buy a Ford Ranger pickup truck without posting it for bid and going out and soliciting quotes and whatnot and having a bid opening and all that, which is not how you buy vehicles. Typically, you would go to the state's bid and use those figures. So that's just kind of a big overview. I don't know if you have any specific questions about any of those policies. The vehicle and traffic was really just to insert rates for charging for electricity at the electric vehicle charging stations. And then the recreation facilities rules and regulations, there's two components there. One is to increase the fee for the non-resident fee, thank you, at parking at Cunningham Pond. And then the second piece was to include a new rental opportunity, which is the racks for kayaks and paddle boards at Cunningham Pond. It's similar to if you go skiing or snowboarding, renting a locker at the mountain to be able to store your skis or snowboard in. The town would have folks sign a waiver of liability if they chose to store their kayaks or paddle boards there. It's been successful in other communities that have similar things. We'd like to try it out here.
And that Cunningham Pond parking fee went from $130 to $150?
Yeah. Yes, it
That was the change?
Yeah.
So not much of a change, but certainly they figured out that their worth that at least, right?
Absolutely. It's not even just that they're worth that, we have the increased cost of the staffing up there as well that we need to account for.
How many non-resident stickers do we sell a year? Is there a limit?
There is a limit. They are limited.
I think it was
and-
like 125 or something like
I
that.
think you're right, 125.
And do they actually sell out?
Yes. Yeah, we already have a waiting list. Lisa's just holding, pending the results of this public hearing before she actually sells.
Last year, they sold out. The year before, they didn't. 'Cause
Well,
that was-
COVID.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, that was okay.
Something was happening. But then last year, they were sold out again. And I think they might have even tried to increase the number of spots.
I think
but
they
they're-
did.
It's like it's a big balancing act between how many people in town are gonna be there and how many out-of-town people.
Yeah.
They do a really good job figuring it out, and they work really hard to make sure that it all comes out right, and it does flow pretty smooth up there, so.
I do have a few questions, but time
Sure,
won't
go ahead.
Under the financials, Part D, I see that's a pretty dramatic increase from $100 to $1,500. Is that because it's just so way out of date in terms
So
of?
way out of date. Yeah, it's incredibly out of date.
So that's a fair amount of cash on hand, though.
Yes, it can be. But, we do have controls for that. And again, that's with recommendations.
Lily has something to offer.
Is that in reference to the amount that we have to go to the bank with? If
Yes.
we have- That's New Hampshire RSA is $1,500.
Oh.
And that's not cash in hand, that's all
Just
checks.
whatever.
Everything.
Exactly, that's everything. So standardly, we go daily. Town clerk goes daily, tax collector goes daily, and everybody else in town brings their revenues to the tax collector's office.
Right. Okay. Under Part F, there's a $25 fee for return checks. Is that over and above what the bank charges us for overdraft?
I believe that is what the bank charges us for overdraft.
Okay. Because I was concerned that typically it's people who don't have very much money at all who end up in this trap of excess fees. So I wanted to make sure that the town wasn't adding to that situation. Okay. Under the credit card use, there's some language in there to try to create gender neutrality, his or hers, or his, and so on and so forth. There were a couple places where it ended up being just her. And now it's appropriate in this case because Lily, but maybe not 5 years from now. But anyway. Well, hopefully.
I'm gonna jump on that too, because I think.
Did I just get fired?
10 years.
So Bill, I'm gonna add to it too. I sent an email referring to that as well, and whatever it is, it should be consistent throughout,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't be for the person that's in the position currently. It
No,
should be
I believe we can make that gender.
Yeah.
non-specific.
I think it was just typing errors or whatever.
And I also asked if we could just eliminate the he, she limit and change it to they or them.
Yep.
I see in the return checks section when it refers to a check writer, certified mail to inform them that their check, it doesn't, there's, that pronoun is there. Let's go generic on the whole thing so it covers everybody and there's no going back and forth when there's changes in position or, hopefully we're not even considering
Yep.
who's in positions anymore. So.
No, that's an easy
Well-
thing to do with one that,
While we're working on one, right?
Yeah,
Not going
exactly.
through the whole code.
Not the whole code
Exactly.
book at once.
While we're in one, let's change it and go forward that way. That'd be great. Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
The only other question I had, just a minor thing, under treasurer, there are bullet points numbered. They need to be renumbered. Some were taken out, some were added, So you just kind of have to go through it.
all
and
right,
do a
so
little
the
editing.
formatting issues.
Yeah.
That's easy.
It's not a big deal. Okay. That was a lot of reading, though.
Yeah.
And a lot of work to edit it, so thank you for
Yeah.
doing that and adding
Yeah, ours is trivial by comparison.
adding a giant section on forgery and fraudulent practices.
In red.
Great addition, yes.
Lily did a great job getting all
Yes,
this.
thank you for that work. All right, Do we have a motion to approve these?
You have to ask
amendments?
for public input.
Of course, thank you for catching that. Is there anybody that would like to add anything or have any questions regarding the policy changes? They have been up online for people to read or look over in the packet, is that
Right.
true? Yeah.
Well, at least anybody that read all of it.
You sure? All right. Thank you for reminding me of that, that's good.
I, if you don't mind, I
Yeah,
do have
Seth.
so Nicole and I worked on the draft language for the EV charging component that you reviewed, which is obviously our first iteration of putting that into the code book because it's a new program in town. Once that language was drafted, it went back to the Peterborough Energy Committee, who were the folks that were instrumental in bringing the charging stations to town. Bill worked on the project, Emily worked on the project. And through some dialogue with them, they reminded me of some pretty critical considerations as we start this program in earnest in town. And a recommendation back from the committee, which I believe there was pretty fair consensus from the folks, was actually to amend that to be $1.50 per hour with no penalties for idle time. And so I'm throwing that out on behalf of the committee. I support that. Our commitment as a town staff has always been to come back to you, the select board, in a matter of a couple months or a quarter or whatever the case may be, to report back on how those are performing. I think it makes sense to encourage use. I agree with the committee. Encourage use. Don't penalize people for idle time at this point. Figure out by soliciting through the police department, through public works, and through other residents in town if we do have issues that need to be addressed, and address them after the fact as opposed to preemptively doing so.
Yeah.
So on behalf of the committee, I think I can speak in confidence that I would like to propose an amendment to $1.50 per hour with no escalating fees for idle times.
Setting rates is a pretty complicated measure because of all the demand charges and everything else going on. There was a proposal for $1 an hour, but by throttling back the actual delivery of kilowatts. And we felt that you get roughly 20 miles per hour, 25 at 7 and 7. So 25 miles, we thought that would be a reasonable, and people are going to probably park there a couple hours, 3 hours while they shop in town or go out to dinner or whatever, or attend a contra dance for that
Or even
matter.
a selectmen's meeting, who knows?
Sometimes those can go pretty long.
Well, I was accused of going to park my vehicle down there at night, but that's not going to happen.
Remember that after.
Will there be a
You're the only one in town with an electric car.
Will there be a towing policy if someone's using and spending overnight there or something?
I think the more typical way to deal with people abusing it is to have escalating rates. But we also, as Bill was sort of alluding to, also need to hit a certain demand target in town. So we want to encourage a minimum, I believe the number was 118 hours of usage in a given month in order for us to meet our goal, our stated goal of the select board, which was not to provide free electricity to end users. So we need to aim for that 118 number. But without any data to go by here in Peterborough, it's hard to know really how to set the rate or any idle times or anything. So I think, at this point, no, I think we should probably gather the data at the rate that's being suggested at $1.50 and report back, make changes from there.
I had a number of conversations with some folks over in Keene. They have a charging station in their municipal lot. They haven't had any issues really with charging. The worst that's happened is people will drop the charge head, onto the ground and somebody will step on it or something. But other than that, and they charge $149, which is kind of a marketing strategy. $149 sounds a little bit better than $150, but I don't think we need to.
Hopefully that doesn't make people go to Keene and stop stopping at Peterborough.
Yeah.
It's a penny an hour. Keep all that.
So you would need a motion with an amendment to that section, right?
Or just when you adopt, with amendments, so if that's one of the amendments you would like to incorporate.
Right.
All right, so is there a motion? Anyone?
Oh, I move that we adopt the $1.50 charge, unlimited time.
Yeah, I'll second that, sure. All those in favor on that one?
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
It's a start and we'll see how it goes, right? And then for the rest of it, all the other amendments to all of these policies, I'll make the motion that we accept them as written with amendments to the yes, that we spoke of.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, thanks again, lots of work. And that's just a fraction of our town code and policy.
Yes.
This,
Yeah, it's a few hundred pages.
Right.
it's a 7
This,
megabyte.
This EV charging station is going to be quite an event. Seth tells me that they're probably going to go in sometime early April, so we'll have a big ribbon cutting ceremony and drive around in electric vehicles and parade of some sort. Probably get Chief Gennard involved and maybe lead the track. Anyway.
You're on an electric bike or something, Chief.
And I also wanted to commend Seth and for all the work that he's done in getting this prepared, site work and all that.
Thanks, Bill.
Good man. Okay.
All right, great. Elderly exemption follow-up. We had discussed the rates at which people can apply for an elderly exemption, and there was some concern about that level, or what if there was anything we could do with it in light of the recent revaluation that brought a lot of our tax bills up.
So the question really comes back to the board. So you've seen Mary Beth's work. You saw the work that I asked Ally to put together for you, just to be able to see where things are at. The question is, will the select board want to do anything this year at town meeting? And if so, what would you like to do?
It's a hard one because if you evaluate the numbers, we're up in the top, what, 20%, 10% in terms of
Exemption amount.
exemption amounts. Do we have any estimate as to the number of people who will drop off of that exemption, given the reval?
We have 35 people who are currently on the exemption. Ally suspects that a handful of them may be close. But it's not that they will, yes, they may be close. So you can certainly look at an increase to the rates, to the thresholds rather.
Mhm.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
But I think we're really fair about how we do it already, where we stand compared to everybody. I mean, Dublin's exemption is like $10,000 of your entire valuation. 10,000, 15,000, and 20,000. That's just off your whole. We're at like 160,000.
Yeah.
The only town that's different is Ware, and I don't really understand how they do that.
Well, Ringe has gotten some pretty big numbers there, too.
I believe Wrench just voted to reduce theirs.
Did they?
Ringe isn't on this list that we got.
It's not on that one, but
Yeah,
I do
we
know
left that
that
off intentionally just because it was such a question mark there as to what.
it was a
their
real
rates were.
outlier, yeah.
Well, Mary Beth's recommendation was that we're good.
Leave it as is, yes. She felt comfortable with where you're at. She feels that Peterborough is very generous in terms of the exemption, and she feels that the thresholds are reasonable.
And as we've discussed, there is the option if, say, your bill went from 0 to 500 or 900 or so, that can be tacked on as basically what, a lien on your
Exactly.
deed?
That's exactly what it is. So it's
Don't have to pay it
an
until
elderly
the
deferral.
property transfers, and it can be paid out of the proceeds of your transfer.
That is correct, yeah.
So that's another option
That's an
if
option.
it really makes the difference.
Per year.
It
That's
has
right,
to be
so you
done
can add it up for the
annually.
length of time that they live there.
It has to be done annually. And it can only be done to a maximum amount. There is a point at which the state does not allow you to add more than, there's a ratio between the amount that's being liened versus the value of the property. So there's a maximum amount, and at that point, unfortunately, it becomes a situation where they will have to sell the home.
You can take out a reverse mortgage to pay that.
Yeah, they have those on TV.
Yeah. And many folks have unfortunately found themselves in very bad situation because of those reverse mortgages. The mortgage holder has to sign off on any kind of a deferral. So that has really backfired for a lot of people and put them in a terrible situation.
All right, so do we need any kind of, we need a motion if we were going to change it, but I think the consensus is we'll,
Leave it as is.
Carol.
Carol Nelson, can I just ask why this is being discussed again? Did something happen that brought this back to the table?
It was just that with the, it was a thought that could we give some relief to some more people if their status changed because of the revaluation? If for, you know, if they were exceeding the $160,000 threshold. So,
We wanted to get some feedback from Mary Beth
And
as
Mary
well.
Beth said you're okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That's her conclusion.
Okay.
There was, there was a few people that went from not having a tax bill to having a pretty small one, and they let us know about it, so we looked into it.
I see. Thank you.
Well, some friends of mine, actually, it became much more substantial than small. It's up around $1,000, you know, so.
Just one more thing, the lien that you talked about, Nicole, are the homeowners, do you know if they're aware of this?
Yes, they have to sign all that document. They have to apply for it. They have to provide, essentially, it's treated as if it was a welfare application. So they have to provide proofs of their income and expenses to show a need. At that point, the selectmen can approve it, and then the property taxes are tacked on to their deed as a lien. It also has to be approved by the state.
I see.
Yeah.
And so they're told you now have a lien on your house?
Oh, yes, no, they're aware that
Okay.
that's the outcome, but. that
They have
is
to
what-
apply to get that in the
Exactly.
first place.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they could say, we can't pay this, and this is an option if they can.
I see.
Right.
Right, so that will be offered as an option if someone says, I can't pay this.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be good. All right, so we'll keep it as is and look at it again in the future.
Yep.
Great, thanks for that work. Thanks to Mary Beth again. Her work on that.
She might almost be wishing she didn't take the contract in Peterborough at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure every
She's
town
had a
has
lot
the
of work to
same.
do.
All right, there's some stuff going on at the State House. You want a quick rundown on SB 249?
SB 249 would prevent municipalities from regulating short-term rentals, which is something that many communities, particularly, you know, the more tourist-heavy communities like Laconia, North Conway, what have you, are very much opposed to, understandably. They've had a lot of trouble with Airbnbs. You know, many of their residents have, you know, had issues with finding out the hard way that their neighbor has, you know, the person who owns the house right next door to them, has it on Airbnb and is renting it out to, you know, as a party house, essentially, and having all sorts of issues. The state, someone introduced this piece of legislation that would prevent municipalities from making any kind of limitations on short-term rentals or having any control over them, which is very frustrating. So of course the selectmen received that letter from Ms. Coatseel and, you know, asking the selectmen of Peterborough to also voice their opposition to that particular piece of legislation.
I-
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that one of the phenomena that's going on these days is corporations are actually buying up properties and then using them as short-term rentals, rather than feeding into the housing stock. So that, you know, they're basically taking good homes off the market. It's much more lucrative to rent it for short-term. But it's a problem, as you mentioned, it's a problem mostly in the seacoast and you know, where there's a lot of rentals available. So I talked to a couple realtors. I didn't talk to Bill, but I talked to Petersons. They don't seem to think that it's a real problem here in this area.
No.
But it's also an issue of local versus state control. And it's kind of interesting because the party of local control is offering all of these state level controls, zoning, you name it. So I'm a proponent of local control, and so I oppose this measure just on that basis.
Yeah, so it's funny the way it's worded too, because prohibit municipalities from regulating or prohibiting the use of any building or structure, including a garage, barn, tool shed, workshop, as a short-term rental business. It's like, what? What? Would that apply to storage facilities then?
That
Like,
could.
what?
Oh, that could be. What action do we want to take, though? That's, I guess, the question.
Let's see if anybody has anything to add. Anybody?
Yeah.
Carol?
When is this getting voted on in Concord?
What did she say?
This, one of these 35,000
I think it's this week.
pages has
I
the-
think it's this week as well. I think it's going to the full house this week.
Yeah, you can go online
Extremely
and
fast paced.
let your individual preferences noted, but I don't know that we want to take action as a select board.
I sent my 2 cents about it through the Board of Realtors, which is also against
Okay,
this,
Yeah.
and has a pretty solid lobbying footprint at the State House. First of all, I think it's too late for us to do it, draft a letter and send it and have it make any difference.
That's probably true.
It's going, so it's
House
going in a
calendar.
crossover, so it's been passed by the Senate and adopted with an amendment by the Senate, and it's going to the House.
Right, the sponsors were all senators.
Yeah, it started in the Senate.
Yeah. So it's going on crossover. Well, we've got a little bit of time to make our,
Yeah, I'd be in favor of joining the list of however many that towns here that,
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if
Kathy
we're drafting a
Brazil.
letter, I'll sign it. It's fine.
all right, so I'll make a motion that we join in on that letter of rejection of SB 249.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
And then the meals and rooms tax.
Now, I heard a rumor that he's stepping back from that statement.
I certainly hope so. It would be incredibly frustrating after the state address to then, turn around and, after touting that.
Is this something we ought to broach with our state senator, who was one of the principals of increasing the amount that's coming back to the towns?
That is why I put it on the selectmen's agenda. I think that is a very good idea to get Senator Bishardi involved in that.
Okay. Do you want to take the ball and run with that?
Yep, I'll draft up a letter.
Is anybody in the room
Something
in
tells me she
favor
already
of?
knows. She's never more than 6 inches away from Senator, is she?
Well, you'd have to ask the gentleman that was here, represented her last time. Anybody in the room in favor of the meals and room tax going away, so the town doesn't get any money?
Would be a temporary thing, but
Well,
It was basically,
all things are temporary.
it was basically in a press conference, he kind of off the cuff said.
Yeah.
And then, he's like, if there's something that comes up that we need to suspend the meals and rooms tax to reignite something, it wasn't like this is legislation that's proposed and it's not like he can just make it so because he decided it.
well, everybody seems to be jumping on the bandwagon because I know that Maggie Hassan had suggested that we wouldn't charge federal gas tax for the summer to
Right.
ease the cost of gasoline.
Right.
So, I mean, I think everybody's kind of jumping on that bandwagon to score some political points.
How about
I
we make the
believe that
gas
came up to
companies pay the
17
federal
cents a
gas
gallon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it isn't exactly,
Well, certainly the 18 or 19 cents a gallon would change everybody's world around when it's at $5. Right?
tax. Okay, so back to the meals and rooms tax, we agreed that you should, if you
Draft
want
a
to
letter.
draft something to Senator Bishardi, that'd be great, and certainly she'll help support us.
That could just be an email at this point, right? Because it's not like we're opposing any specific legislation.
that's true. There is nothing,
Nothing.
Yeah.
although I think he could do that by executive order, couldn't he?
That's the concern.
I'm not sure.
That's the
exactly.
concern.
Yeah.
Should we CC the governor?
I don't
Yes,
think that's a real thing.
When she was here, did she talk about that?
Yes.
Is that specifically why she was
We
here?
should
Yes.
write a check with her
Oh,
that showed how much Peterborough was getting.
oh. Jeez.
That's what I recall. Yeah.
So I remember from the parade up front when they carried this big check in.
being facetious,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't a giant, there was a spreadsheet.
Hopefully she's watching us mock her in this meeting.
Okay, great. Anything else to add to our agenda before we wait a half an hour for our budget meeting?
I think that's really about it.
We needed something to talk about in the off time. Lily can probably offer some expertise because Conway, her former town, or most recent town, just went through the whole Airbnb
We had
restricting thing.
5 warrant articles on the last annual town meeting ballot that I was there for, where the town voted all of them down in order to regulate Airbnbs. Airbnbs ruined that town. It's the kind of thing where the people that lived across the street from us, the individual sold, a couple from New York bought it, and as soon as they started Airbnb-ing, it was a nightly fireworks display at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Nice.
And I lived in the Conway Village section of town, so the areas of town that are much more predominantly tourism-driven were much more deeply affected, but all it takes is one neighbor in the neighborhood lighting off fireworks on a nightly basis to ruin the fabric of your little community.
There are ordinances against that, aren't there? I mean, noise ordinances and so on.
Sometimes.
There are no noise
Sometimes, not
ordinances
always.
in Conway.
And they're incredibly difficult to enforce. which
Mm-hmm.
Chief has researched extensively.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Human behavior.
Shall we recess for 29 minutes?
Time for dinner?
yep,
Go grab a hamburger.
we have stuff delivered here, Bill.
Oh,
I just order off the menu. but chef
I've never been,
right in.
I've never been invited to this. Do we need a motion to,
To go into recess? Yes.
Mandy's in there.
Make a motion that we go into recess until
I second that motion. Aye.
Is Ally watching?
She is. Actually, she texted me right through this.
Tell you one thing, I couldn't be happier that we got the on air. I mean, you know how much of a thing that is for me.
It's been no longer than a 10 somebody.
Don't get old.
Just been.
Whatever you do.
I'm already there.
I know, right?
So bad. Oh, yeah.
Well, at least today you could.
Crazy how much